All right, let's bring this hearing to order, if you don't mind. Thank you all for coming. Saturday will mark the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission. The moon landing still unites and inspires Americans like few events in our nation's history. It's hard to believe that a half-century has passed since the United States won the space race. Although it's fitting to celebrate such past achievements, we are pleased that NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine is here to discuss the future of American space exploration. In December of 2017, President Trump outlined a bold vision to reinvigorate America's space leadership. Space Policy Directive 1 calls for returning humans to the moon for the first time since 1972. But this time it will be for long-term exploration and use and will be followed by manned missions to Mars. NASA had planned to return to the moon by 2028, but in a speech to the National Space Council in April, Vice President Pence announced a dramatic acceleration of that timeline. Under the Artemis Program, the United States will now land the first woman and the next man on the moon by 2024 and establish a sustained presence on the moon or in lunar orbit by 2028. I share the administration's sense of urgency. As I told Administrator Bridenstine during his March appearance before this committee, the United States has entered a new space race driven primarily by the expansion of China's space power ambitions and the explosive potential growth for space commerce. I support setting clear goals on ambitious timelines to achieve mission success. However, in order to reach these goals, NASA and its commercial and international partners will have to accomplish a great deal of work in a short amount of time. The Space Launch System, SLS rocket, and Orion crew capsule need to be tested and certified for human missions as soon as possible. We also need to build multi-component lunar landing systems and the Gateway orbiting lunar outpost that docks the Orion crew capsule and lunar landers needs to be assembled in space. I know that as they continue to pursue these ambitious goals, NASA will maintain the highest commitment to safety. Part of that commitment to safety should include the completion of a full green run test of the SLS core stage. And there's no better place to do that than at the Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. The cost is a challenge for NASA. In May, the administration submitted an FY20 budget amendment for $1.6 billion in additional funding related to the accelerated Artemis schedule, an amount Administrator Bridenstine has called a down payment. The administrator has said the program could cost $20 to $30 billion over the next 5 years. By my math, that calls on the Congress to appropriate $4 to $6 billion in extra funding each year. In turn, Congress needs more details on the funding requirements so we can be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. Concerns have also been raised about NASA moving funding from other important priorities to pay for Artemis. Any reprioritization needs to include early and detailed consultation with this committee and with the Congress to ensure critical programs are not undermined. I look forward to Mr. Bridenstine shedding light on these projected funding needs and what is required to address concerns about different components of Artemis, specifically the Gateway orbiter, in order to execute the program successfully. The anniversary of Apollo 11 reminds us all of past progress and untapped potential, but constantly changing mission priorities, unstable funding, and goals set too far in the future have caused America's space program to suffer. Congress should and will perform its oversight duties, but we also need to provide NASA with the consistent direction, clarity of purpose, and funding it needs for success. I want you to succeed, Mr. Bridenstine. I'm excited about this. I hope this hearing will help provide insight necessary to make good on the legacy of Apollo. And I now turn to my dear friend, Ranking Member Cantwell, for her remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for holding this important NASA hearing today. about the plans to return American astronauts to the surface of the moon by 2024. 50 years ago, yesterday, NASA launched the Apollo 11 mission, and 5 days later, on July 20th, 1969, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first people to walk on the moon. 5 subsequent Apollo missions successfully landed 10 more Americans, and I should say 3 lunar rovers built in the state of Washington, and we're very proud of the role that we played. Just as importantly, the Apollo program inspired an entire generation of engineers and scientists. Some of them went on to space careers, but many of them went on to other careers in other fields of high technology. This generation of dreamers and thinkers firmly established the United States as a global leader in innovation and technology. The space race and NASA's investment in space also perpetrated a thriving commercial space industry that exists today, and again, very proud of those companies that reside in the state of Washington, using the expertise of many Washington scientists and engineers to help us achieve this mission. The benefits of space exploration are clear. NASA should continue to push the boundaries of space science, exploration, and technology, and I'm pleased that NASA has started to outline a plan deep into space. I also appreciate that NASA is looking at the non-traditional partnerships that the commercial space community can give in that relationship and in space exploration. Today, NASA has been developing the rocket and spacecraft need for deep space exploration mission for more than 9 years, and NASA's own estimate is that SLS and Orion won't be ready to fly crew until 2022 at the earliest. So NASA has just started to study the lunar landers and other critical hardware needed for a moon mission. It's hard to believe that all these key pieces can fall together in just the next 5 years. Furthermore, last week, I know you've made some changes at the organization, the head of human exploration. And so with that and NASA's retirement of the space shuttle, the question of where is the leadership within the organization to deliver on this goal will be some of the things I'm going to drill down on in the Q&A part of this hearing this morning. And finally, NASA has yet to deliver a congressional budget for the mission beyond 2020. So it's difficult for us to approve the mission if we don't know what the ultimate cost will be to the taxpayers. While we celebrate this unbelievable accomplishment and the fact that you're continuing to be pioneers in space, we also need to look at the next chapter of exploration and make sure it's a successful one. I appreciate the value of ambition and vision, but I also look forward to hearing from you, Administrator Bridenstine, on just exactly how we're going to meet this challenge. So again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. And I would like to include for the record the testimony of Dr. Patricia Sanders, the head of NASA's Aerospace Safety Advisory Board, who has highlighted some of the challenges that I mentioned.
Without objection, it will be added. And thank you, Senator Cantwell. Administrator Bridenstine, you are recognized for an opening statement. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Cantwell, and thank you for the members of the committee for having me here today. We are indeed celebrating 50 years of Apollo, and in that era we had this great contest of great powers, and we were trying to demonstrate our technological prowess, our ability to lead the world. And in that era, it wasn't just about technological prowess. We were trying to demonstrate that our political and economic system was, in fact, superior to that of the former Soviet Union. And of course, we are also proud of what NASA did in those days when our astronauts, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, walked on the surface of the moon for the first time in human history. And here we are 50 years later, still celebrating that monumental, absolutely stunning achievement. But as the ranking member identified, we did 5 additional missions after that. A total of 12 people walked on the surface of the moon, and then the program ended. And I think that's kind of been a letdown for NASA over the last 50 years. We want to continue doing these stunning achievements and go further and explore more. And that's what this new program is all about. We call it Artemis. We think about the history of the Apollo program and what it meant to the United States of America. Well, in Greek mythology, Apollo had a twin sister, and her name was Artemis, and she was the goddess of the moon. This time, under the Artemis program, when we go forward to the moon sustainably, we go with a very diverse, highly qualified astronaut corps that includes women. And we have direction from the Vice President, who of course is the Chairman of the National Space Council, that within 5 years we will land the next man and the first woman, he said, on the south pole of the moon. I think that's an important distinction as well. All of these years we believed that the moon was bone dry. Up until 2008 and 2009, now we know that there are hundreds of millions of tons of water ice on the south pole of the moon. Water ice represents air to breathe. It represents water to drink. And hydrogen and oxygen, when cracked into its component, when H2O is cracked into hydrogen and oxygen, put into cryogenic liquid form, it is in fact the same rocket fuel that powered the space shuttles. And it's available in hundreds of millions of tons on the south pole of the moon. So this time when we go to the moon, we're doing it entirely differently. The direction is to go sustainably. In other words, to have access to the moon anytime, but not just anytime, but have access to the entirety of the moon. So we don't miss another stunning discovery like water ice, which we missed for almost 40 years. So we want to go back to the moon sustainably. We want to have access to all parts of the moon anytime we want. And of course, we want to use this as the proving ground. It is, I want to be clear, this is the proving ground. It is how we learn to live and work on another world using the resources of that world so we can in fact take that technology, take that capability to Mars. That's the long-term vision. And we have, I think, a good start. As the chairman identified, we certainly have in the President's budget request what we need to come out of the gate. I would suggest that by the 2021 budget request, we'll have more details as far as the trades that, that we need to make within the option space to go to the moon sustainably with an eye for Mars, and at the same time do it in a way that is commensurate with the budgets of the United States. And so that's what we're working on right now, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for holding this hearing on the anniversary of Apollo, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Administrator Bridenstine, and I'm afraid I must have misspoken earlier when I said that this was the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. I was a freshman in college at the time, and that could not possibly have been 50 years ago. So I'm going to ask my staff to recalculate that.
No one questioned you.
Something is wrong there. Well, look, we're going to have to get the money right, and thank you for being ambitious. And thank you to the administration for saying we can move this 5 years earlier and make it a priority and something we can be proud of, but something that's going to be safe. Let me just ask, there's talk about not getting a budget number for defense and non-defense discretionary, getting to October 1st and moving to a CR, maybe a short-term 2-week CR, month-long, or even a year-long. That would be counterproductive to getting you where you need to go. Is that correct? And how would it affect you?
Yes, sir, it would be devastating. What we lack right now is a lander. The United States of America has not had a moon lander since 1972, the last time we landed on the surface of the moon. That's something that we need to develop. Of course, we have commercial partners that they've been investing their own money, and we're thrilled about that. By the way, we have opportunities to achieve this goal because of the investments some of them have already made, and in fact, a number of them. I mean, we're talking about a number of private companies that have already invested money. That being said, it's not cheap to build a lander, and of course, they're looking for support from NASA, and we want to be that support. We believe doing a public-private partnership is an important thing, and at the end, with a public-private partnership, they will be able to have customers that are not NASA. In other words, we can have more access for a lesser cost and grow the space economy. All of that being said, if we end up in a CR, that lander doesn't continue to get developed. And We don't have money in the budget right now to develop a lander. It takes a good bit of time, which is why we need to get started right away. If we end up, sir, in a CR for a period of a year or even more, it would be devastating for trying to achieve the goal of landing the next man and the first woman on the South Pole.
To some people, a CR, continuing resolution, sounds innocuous. Just level funding, just keep the level funding. It's way worse than that, isn't it, Mr. Administrator?
It is. In fact, a lot of people associate, and I can tell you as the NASA administrator, they associate a CR with keeping things steady. The reality is we then do not make investments that we need to make, but even worse, we continue to make investments that we don't need to make. And so it is in fact a waste of money when we end up in a CR, and that's one of my biggest concerns, is we will be spending money on things we don't need and not spending money on the things we do need.
Thank you for clarifying that. You told the committee in March that NASA would examine all available options to ensure the first flight of the SLS, now called Artemis 1, takes place by 2021. How confident are you now that we can meet that deadline of 2021 for Artemis 1?
I think 2021 is definitely achievable for the Artemis 1 launch vehicle. As has already been identified by the ranking member, Mr. Chairman, we've made some changes at the head of the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate. Some of the key challenges that we've had as an agency going back in time is cost and schedule, being realistic about cost and schedule, and then meeting the cost and schedule milestones that we ourselves set. So in order to reset the cost and schedule of some of these flagship programs, as you've said, SLS, we've made changes at the top of the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate. We are moving rapidly to put new folks in place. Again, highly qualified folks, but I want them to be in place before we set out a new deadline for Artemis 1. And I say that because we need buy-in from the people who will lead the agency. And that goes all the way down to the Stennis Space Flight Center. We need buy-in there. We need to set very realistic milestones. Some of the challenges we've had in the past, and this is in GAO reports and IG reports, NASA has not been good at setting realistic budgets and schedule, and we need to get better at that. So before we announce a new date, I want to make sure that we have a new leadership team in place.
Good. And quickly, with regard to Green Run, are you still determined to do it? Will you do all of it or just part of it?
Green Run is absolutely in the baseline plan. And as far as the scope of the Green Run, I don't know what that is going to look like yet. I want to make sure we get the new team in place so that they can assess the situation, and I will be more than happy to report to you as soon as that's in place.
Thank you, sir. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Bridenstine, you mentioned the Human Space Exploration Associate Administrator. So who's going to be making decisions on Artemis, such as whether or not to do a Green Run test of the space launch system?
We want to make sure that we have new leadership in place before we make those decisions. Certainly, we have very experienced, highly qualified folks in acting positions in those key positions, namely Human Exploration and Operations, the Associate Administrator, and then the Exploration Systems Development Division within Human Exploration. We have acting folks there that they've been at the agency a long time, highly qualified, and in fact, they may end up applying for the positions and getting the positions. We're opening it up to the entire nation. We want to find the absolute best talent. We want to move quickly. I think that's important, ma'am.
That doesn't affect your decision-making in the next time period here?
Within the next probably 6 weeks, it will not. But I do want to make sure that before we make commitments on the scope of the Green Run, before we make commitments on timelines, I want to make sure that new team is in place and that they have buy-in to realistic cost and schedule so that ultimately it's their cost and schedule and they can be held accountable to it.
And you think that was something that was missing before?
I think we have a long history at NASA of cost and schedule not being set in a realistic way, and then, of course, not achieving our cost and schedule. And in many cases, that leads to lack of confidence from the key people that we need, namely folks here on this committee.
Well, and I definitely believe in system testing. I think we've learned enough from Columbia and other things that we need to have testing.
Yes,
is
ma'am.
very, very important. So when can we expect to see a 2024 budget for the, the operation?
So the 2021 budget development is underway right now. We are working within the administration to come up with what the trades are so that we can get an accurate budget presented for 2021. And in that 2021 budget, you will see the out-year funding for the Artemis program through 2024. And
So you think we'll be able to see an extrapolation of that number and make a guesstimate?
no, I mean, I think you'll see the dollars that we are looking at spending for the years 22, 23, 24 in order to achieve
Okay,
that
so
milestone.
we will have a number, is what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and that's going to be soon.
It'll be in the regular 2021 budget process, so February of 2020.
Okay, thank you. Definitely thank you for Artemis. I hope that in this next mission, we can use whatever tools we have to call on America's brightest women engineers to participate in this process. As we've all looked at the video of the last launch, we can see one thing is missing. We don't see a lot of women in those control rooms. We don't see a lot of women in those pictures, but appreciate the fact that you are trying to uphold an image here. And so I hope that we'll do some serious work at trying to use that as a tool. There aren't a lot of tools where we're calling on women to help with such a national mission, and I hope that we do that. One thing that we can do here on the committee, because we're not going to build the launch system for you, but we can make sure that we get this weather situation correct. And one of the things when Chairman Ajit Pai was here, he said there was absolutely no legitimacy to the issues raised by NASA. Could I just get your comments on that so that we can keep making progress in solving this issue and how important accurate weather forecasting information is, not just for you, but for the traveling public?
Yes, ma'am. So when we think about the 24 gigahertz part of the electromagnetic spectrum for 5G, depending on the decibel level, that will definitely bleed over to the 23.6 gigahertz part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And there is risk there that when it bleeds over, some of the sensors in space that are looking at the Earth to characterize water vapor and energy of that water vapor, some of that data could be interfered with. It could be corrupted. Now, I will tell you, I just want to be really clear, this was a study done by NASA on behalf of NOAA. NASA didn't have a dog in this fight, other than we have great scientists and engineers that can do this kind of analysis. That's it. And we do have one or two missions that use that part of the spectrum for sure, but nothing compared to what NOAA has for weather prediction. This is a weather prediction kind of effort, and I can tell you that depending on the decibel level in that 23.6 gigahertz, we could lose significant data. Now, again, depending on that decibel level, we could lose, according to the study, up to 70% of that data. And if that were to happen, it would affect our ability to predict weather without question. I do think that there could be an elegant solution. Look, this is outside my area. It's not NASA's job to do this, but I do think there's an elegant solution where the decibel level could be modified to the point where we could get all of the weather data we need and still be able to operate the 24 gigahertz for 5G. It might require additional cell towers, that kind of thing. But again, there are other people that should be considering that. But I will tell you, there is a risk here.
Well, I consider those legitimate concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I do too. So, although it's not your thing, it's vitally important to you.
It is.
Have you had a conversation with Chairman Pai, person to person, about this issue?
I have not. So NASA did the study for NOAA.
I understand.
So.
All right. Thank you. Next, we have, I believe it's Senator Scott, and he's not here. Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Administrator Bridenstine, for being here. Last night, I had the opportunity to walk down the mall and see thousands of Americans, people from across around the globe that were gathered on the mall to watch the incredible projection of the Saturn rocket on the Washington Monument. And it was a time to see families together. Some were having picnics, telescopes out on the mall. They had cameras and T-shirts wearing, emblazoned with the NASA logo, and celebration of a historic accomplishment 50 years ago. And it made me incredibly proud of this country. And I hope that we can find more moments like that to celebrate, not just in this, but in so many great things and achievements this country has accomplished. At times of great division and political strife, things like this can bring the country together. And you saw it last night on the mall. And I think I even texted you a picture of it. I don't know if you had a chance to get down there or not, but hope you will.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that. It was a great picture.
I think when you look back to the opportunities we have in space, I think, look just around the hearing room, my guess is a significant majority of the people in this hearing room weren't here 50 years ago when the United States embarked on this incredible effort. And so our generation, Mars could mean incredible, it could mean an incredible amount of new opportunity and hope for our country. What are the 2 or 3 things that this Congress ought to be looking at that will ensure we're successful in prioritizing that we get back to the moon and to Mars? I mean, what are the 2 or 3 things that we ought to be completely mindful of and dedicated to?
So I think what we have to think about just as a nation, and when we talk about vision, that's what NASA does for the country, provide vision. I loved how you just talked about the turmoil that our country was in at the time. Vietnam was raging. There were protests in the streets. We had civil rights abuses. We had civil rights protests. The country was torn apart. And yet there was this moment in time in 1969 where all of the country, in bipartisan fashion, and not just all of the country, the entire world watched as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon. And in fact, it was seen or heard by tens of millions of people behind the Iron Curtain in Russia, in Cuba, at a time when relationships were as bad as they've ever been with these nations. So I think what we need to be focused on as a country is, here we are 50 years later. We think about Apollo and the popularity of Apollo as it was moving along, and we lost 3 brave astronauts. There were times when Apollo was at risk. It was never tremendously popular as a program until we accomplished that stunning achievement. And once we accomplished that stunning achievement, here we are, 50 years after Apollo, commemorating that stunning achievement. So the question is, what are we doing today that 50 years after we achieve whatever the new stunning achievement is, 50 years later, people are going to be commemorating? Because that's how we inspire. That's how we create the next generation of scientists or engineers for our country that can have benefits for the economy, that can have benefits for national security and defense, and of course that has benefits for future exploration. So I think that the key thing is to think, what is that stunning achievement? I'll tell you what I believe it is. It's finding life on another world. And in the last year, significant discoveries have been made that indicate life very well could exist on Mars.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about some of the leadership changes and finding new leadership. Last week regarding changes of leadership, NASA's Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate. Does the leadership change mean a change in NASA's direction or long-term vision?
Not one bit.
Yeah. There are incredible initiatives within NASA, specifically under Human Exploration Operations Mission Directorate. Will the change in leadership mean that the strategies, for example, like Gateway, are being reevaluated?
Not at all.
Okay. The STPI report that NASA had commissioned talked a little bit about the challenge with the time frame. How do we overcome the findings of that report?
Well, I think there are technologies that can be developed that accelerate the path. You're talking about the path to Mars.
Right.
There are technologies that can be developed that accelerate the path, and there are new approaches that I don't think are being considered. And we have a small team of people looking at this and evaluating whether or not we could, in fact, do a short duration stay on Mars using orbital physics that I don't think many people have considered in the past. And I think if we could do that, we could accelerate the timeline. I've said publicly I am not willing to rule out the 2033 timeline. Of course, your friend and colleague in the House, Representative Ed Perlmutter, has been very keen on the 2033 timeline. I think there is a possibility that could be achieved, but we're looking at what that trade space would be, and we're going to do our own assessments. But certainly, I think there are ways that could be considered that would increase the timeline, improve the timeline.
Well, thank you, Administrator, for giving us all something to hope for and drive for. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chairman Wicker and Ranking Member Cantwell, for holding this hearing, and welcome back to our witness, Administrator Bridenstine.
Thank you.
Yesterday marked it was the actual 50th, Chairman, so sorry about that, of the Apollo launch. A historic event in American history and a monumental moment for space exploration. Last week, as the ranking member of the Aviation and Space Subcommittee, I was proud to preside with Senator Cruz at a hearing discussing human space exploration both in the past and in the future. As we look to the future of space exploration, we must first address space industry issues we face here on Earth. So, Administrator, I'd like to start by asking about the workforce capacity of NASA and its commercial partners. From the time NASA decided to end the Space Shuttle program through today, NASA's prime contractor workforce has declined by over 60%. At the same time, more than 21% of NASA's civil service workforce is currently eligible for retirement, and more than half are over 50 years old. If we are to return to the moon, these are some of the challenges we must address. But a 2017 OIG report found that NASA's capability leadership teams, tasked with determining if NASA missions have a high likelihood of success, had regularly failed to determine if NASA's workforce was able to meet the needs of the mission or the agency. So after serving as the NASA administrator for over a year, what efforts have you taken to ensure the workforce at NASA and its commercial partners are able to sustain long-term American space leadership? And how can our committee assist NASA in strengthening its workforce to support missions to the moon, Mars, and beyond?
So NASA has a number of programs that we use to inspire young folks to enter into the STEM fields, and that's really where the key is. If you go back to the Apollo era, most of the NASA workforce was Jack Schmitt, who's a NASA astronaut and a geologist. He landed on the moon. He was one of the 12 moonwalkers. He has said that the NASA workforce was somewhere between 25 and 30 years old on average in those days. We're significantly different from that, as you've identified. We have a bow wave of retirements coming. As you mentioned, half of our workforce is above 50 years old. That puts a tremendous challenge that we need to address on the table. A couple of things that I think are important, and that is getting people inspired early. And I will tell you one program that I've talked about a lot, that I fully support, that has direct implications for NASA's workforce, is FIRST Robotics. These young folks that are very diverse in high school are engaged in these robotic competitions that are absolutely mind-boggling, that these high school kids can build these robots to compete at this level. And what we find is there's a direct positive correlation between these kids that participate in these activities and them going into those STEM fields that are so critical for the future. If you go out to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is where we build the robots for Mars, you will talk to folks that are building robots for Mars right now that, in fact, were part of FIRST Robotics in high school. So I think that kind of capability is tremendously valuable for the workforce that we're going to need 10 years from now, for the workforce we're going to need 20 years from now, and it's not just for NASA, although we see it in real time at NASA. And NASA is a big sponsor of that activity. And we provide mentors, 10 centers across the United States. We have mentors embedded with these kids that are doing these just mind-boggling robotic development projects. So I think FIRST Robotics is one of those things. One of the challenges that we have to consider, though, is the middle management that becomes upper management. There's a gap in middle management. That's where we're going to have a gap that we have to fill. And so we're working right now on where we can get that talent, thinking about Are there mid-career professionals in other industries that could help us? Those kind of things. But the reality is we need a bench. We're actually pretty good right now in developing that bench, but there is a gap there that you've identified.
Thanks. I next want to discuss NASA's collaboration with universities. In December of 2018, NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft entered into orbit around the asteroid Bennu, and within 6 months had discovered water molecules in a never-seen-before phenomenon where the asteroid ejects particulate matter into space without an apparent cause. And next summer, the probe will land on the asteroid and return a material sample to Earth, allowing scientists to study a 4.5 billion-year-old asteroid up close. I'm really proud that this mission was proposed by Dr. Dante Loretta, a University of Arizona professor, and supported by science teams at the U of A and Arizona State University. Missions like OSIRIS-REx combine innovative ideas from Unity researchers with NASA's technical expertise to make groundbreaking discoveries. Administrator, are there new programs that NASA is implementing to give universities more opportunities to lead the development of space science missions? And what role do you envision these partnerships having as we prepare to go to the moon, Mars, and beyond?
So you have correctly identified NASA has had amazing success with university partnerships, especially within the Science Mission Directorate, which is doing these stunning achievements, as you mentioned. An asteroid return mission for the first time in human history. And I will tell you, Arizona universities, whether it's the University of Arizona or Arizona State, these two universities are leading the world when it comes to university engagement with NASA and developing these programs and projects. And here's the thing, what we find, when universities do this activity, meeting cost and schedule happens. And that's not always the case at NASA, but universities have an opportunity to do that. Going back to your workforce issue, this directly ties in. Because when these universities engage in these projects, they get the students involved. And then those students enter the workforce immediately ready to take on projects for NASA. That's how we develop the workforce of the future. So yes, we have a number of different programs. Of course, you've identified some of them already. But having principal investigators at universities that propose these projects and then using the universities to develop those projects, I think is a great way to stay on cost and schedule, to develop the workforce of the future, and of course, to get young folks involved in our missions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Administrator, for being here. As you know, Kennedy Space Center and NASA's efforts are very important to Florida and to the Florida economy. When the Obama administration shut down manned flight, we lost about 7,000 jobs, which impacted our economy, but plus it impacted the talent that stayed around the Space Coast to impact future NASA missions. So we were able to, through what the private sector did, and as a governor, we spent $230 million to invest in the Space Coast, and now it's thriving again. And a lot of it's because of very good decisions Kennedy Space Center made, and on top of that, these private companies have just poured in an unbelievable amount of money. What do you need? And we all know the importance of what you're doing. How difficult it is to come up with the numbers that it takes so you can defend, when you come here to ask for resources. How do you figure? How do you do it?
So it is exceptionally difficult, and I'll tell you what. First of all, what Kennedy has done is amazing. Becoming a multi-user spaceport where you've got private sector companies launching rockets side by side with NASA and Air Force and everybody else, commercial, government. And one other thing, Bob Cabana is the center director down there, and he's done amazing work to grow that industry in Florida. But I think one of the areas where the rest of the country could help is modeling the investments that the state of Florida made into that space center that ultimately is enabling NASA to accomplish its mission. And so I want to tell you, from the agency perspective, we are grateful for your leadership when you were governor to help us keep that going. So I just want to be on the record with that. And there are other states around the country that could do similar things. A couple of other points as far as like the idea of how do we come up with these kind of schedules, given how complex these missions are. It's very difficult because when we do these things, we're inventing for the first time subsystems to subsystems. And depending on how those work, then we can put them in the subsystems. And then those subsystems are being invented for the first time, and then we put them in the systems. And so there is a very difficult process here where we're not mass producing automobiles, for example. We are inventing things for the first time. We're developing things for the first time. NASA is not, we're not a manufacturing organization. We are a development organization. And now we do it alongside with a lot of these commercial partners that, of course, are operating out of the Kennedy Space Center. So it is often hard. I'll tell you where we are not good as an agency. What we like to do in many cases is come up with a plan. If everything goes right, here's the end state. Oh, by the way, we'll put in 50% margin. But if any one thing goes wrong along that path, you can eat up that 50% margin just like this, and it has follow-on effects. And so the risk is still there, but so the risk continues on the schedule, but at the same time, the margin is gone. And so this puts us in a situation where we need to be more realistic about schedule and cost as we go forward. The agency has always, one of the things I love about the agency is that so many people there have this can-do spirit. A lot of people there, they want to make it happen. They believe they can make it happen. They're some of the smartest people in the country, and I believe they can make it happen. But because our missions and our systems are sometimes so complex, and this is the biggest challenge, because they're so complex, any small change that has to be made takes a long time to fix. And so we have had a hard time with that, as has been indicated by the Inspector General reports, the GAO reports. That's why we're making changes at the top of leadership within the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate, but it's something we need to get better at.
Is there things that we can do and that NASA can do or Congress can help you do that will create more incentives for states to invest or the private sector to make bigger investments and take more of the risk?
I think that's a wonderful question. I'd love to take it for the record. I can tell you there's a team of people sitting behind me that would love to come up with a list of things states can do to help us, and I'm sure we can provide that to you, sir.
Well, I'm sure all these states want the work done in their state, and they want to be proud of the work done in their state, and so they do. I think many people would do the same thing Florida did if there was an opportunity.
I think you're right, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Moran. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Bridenstine, thank you very much for your presence here today. Thank you for your leadership and vision. I'm impressed by you, as I've indicated previously in other hearings, and I appreciate what you're doing to take NASA into a different realm and take our country with it.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. First of all, you said something in response to an earlier question that I want to flesh out. And that's something I've been looking for a while as an appropriator in this arena, the 5-year plan. And I think if I heard you correctly, understood what you were saying is that while we have a 1-year, $1.6 billion request for FY20, the administration, you, OMB, and others are working to have, and when they put together their request for FY21, that will then include the numbers that I've been looking for. What is it going to cost over the next 5 years? Despite what you and the senator from Florida had to say, those numbers, I understand, are difficult to come by. But for me and others who are interested in this program, we need to know not what it costs this year, but what it costs over the life of the project. And
yes, sir.
Did I understand your answer to Senator Cantwell correctly?
Yes, sir. So there are trades that we have to negotiate out, and that happens inside the administration, of course, with OMB and the National Space Council, and of course, the chairman of the National Space Council is the vice president. So we need to come up with what these trades are, come to an agreement within the administration. Not we have to be careful that we keep our eye on what the goal is. The goal is the first woman on the South Pole of the Moon in 2024, and then once we have those trades made, commit to the baseline, and then make sure we come up to the Hill here and share it with our members of Congress and senators.
When you say trades,
yes, sir.
Trades within the NASA budget, trades within the broad funding?
Within the architecture. So I'll give you an example. You look at Apollo. We had one lander. We had one human lander, and that was it. And because of that, there were major risks in that landing system. Apollo 8 went to the moon without a lander because the lander, quite frankly, wasn't ready. It took years later before we took the lander to the moon. That wasn't years, but months. And so, but the question is, how do we mitigate risk and use our, what didn't exist back then, commercial companies that are willing to make their own investments? And so there's a lot of variables at play here, a lot of knobs to turn, if you will. Some commercial companies want to invest as much as 30%, maybe even more, into the project. So that helps us if they get selected for the project. If they don't get selected for the project, it doesn't help us. We want to make sure they're capable of achieving the end state, but at the same time, we're attracted to the fact that private companies want to make this investment. So depending on how much money these companies invest changes the number. The other thing is, do we want to have just one lander? Do we want to have 3 landers? In my view, we should have 3 commercial landers that are receiving support from commercial industry, and then as time goes on, down select to 2. And that keeps them all very, very motivated to be one of those 2 down selected companies. And so that mitigates risk, because now if something goes wrong with one, the others go forward, and we can stay on schedule.
I didn't artfully ask my question. You artfully answered it, and we both knew what I think I was talking about. But what we're talking about is a 5-year plan for Artemis.
Yes, ma'am.
And,
Yes, sir.
That, I understand we're not going to have a 5-year plan for everything NASA's going to do, but for us to begin the process of funding Artemis, we need to know how it is at least envisioned, estimated, that money is going to be required into the future. You and the chairman had a conversation in today's hearing that I would highlight. None of this will work, and I need your assistance with the administration, your assistance with your former colleagues in the House. I need everyone to know that if we're going to pursue a more bold plan at NASA, we have to have a budget agreement that allows us to spend the money. And a CR is, as you indicated, is devastating to this cause. And so I would just ask you to rally your friends and colleagues to make certain that Congress understands, while none of us may get exactly what we want in a budget agreement, many things that we do care about will simply not occur in the absence of finding some middle ground, some compromise in regard to those caps. A CR is damaging well beyond NASA and needs to be avoided. Finally, I would add, in 13 seconds, tell me about the international. You and I were at the Australian Embassy a week or 2 ago. What international role is there in Artemis in particular? Anything?
Yes, sir. So we look at the International Space Station, an amazing achievement of not just technology, but also diplomacy. 15 nations operating the ISS. Of course, the United States of America is the lead on it. But we want to take that coalition and we want to go all the way to the moon and, in fact, even grow it from there. That's what Artemis is all about. And this time when we go to the moon, we have a very diverse astronaut corps that includes women. So in my view, the coalition is important. There are other countries. This is another reason sometimes it's hard to come up with what the numbers are, because we need to get commitments from these other nations. And in some cases, they're willing to put forth a good chunk of their own money in order to help us achieve a sustainable presence on the surface of the moon. So,
Administrator, thank you, and thanks to the President and the Vice President for their leadership in regard to space.
yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Moran. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Administrator. Good to see you again.
Always.
Thanks for your leadership here and your team. I think this is all, as Senator Gardner said, very exciting, and I think there's an opportunity to do a lot more here. Let me ask just a couple questions. Have you read the book American Moonshot, John F. Kennedy and the
I've
Great
read
Space
excerpts.
Race by Douglas Brinkley?
Yes, sir. Rice University professor, my alma mater.
Yeah, it's
Go Owls, hoot.
It's a good read, and I think it kind of shows a lot of historical analogies of what's happening now and what happened back then. How about, I think I've asked you this before, have you seen the movie The Martian?
Yes.
And the reason I've asked that, I think there's an opportunity here when you see Hollywood doing movies that are quite inspiring, based on a really inspiring book, to do what Senator Sinema was highlighting, which is get our young men and women, high school kids throughout this country excited about space and NASA, the way it was during the Kennedy moonshot years as laid out in that Douglas Brinkley book. What should we be doing to help you to help on that mission, which I think is a great opportunity But I don't think we're taking full advantage of it. You and I have talked about this before. How do we inspire America's youth to not only get involved, but to bring us to the next level? Because they clearly have the ability. We just got to help inspire them.
I like what you said. You called it Kennedy's moonshot. It's important to remember that by the time we landed on the moon, President Kennedy, he had already been deceased for 6 years, maybe 7 years, by the time we landed on the moon.
It was his vision, of course.
It was his vision. And I think that's the important thing to remember, especially for the House and the Senate, that this is a project. When we talk about going to Mars, this is a project where a vision has to be laid out, but it has to be a vision that remains consistent. And that's where Congress rolls in and can help. And in fact, when I was in the House, we passed the NASA Transition Authorization Act of 2017, signed by the President, to keep that constancy of purpose. So I really think the constancy of purpose is what enables these things to move forward, and Congress is the agency that can help. But as far as inspiring that next generation, sir, we have to be thinking about the stunning achievements. What are the things where people a lot of people have talked on this committee about, 50 years ago. I can't believe it was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm the first NASA administrator who was not alive when that moonshot occurred. I wasn't alive for any of the moonshots. I don't have that memory.
Well, let me ask you on timelines and vision and kind of the bold stroke that you're talking about. I was reading your bulletin to the NASA employees, and if you can help me understand, you talk about the Artemis 1 mission within the lunar vicinity by 2022, and yet you were talking about 2024 on the landing. So what, if you, and I know we only got a couple more minutes, but if you can lay out the schedule, is it 2022, is it 2024 for being back on the moon, and also help me understand, so Apollo 11 had the Saturn V rockets, had the lunar module, had the command module orbiting the moon. What's the similarity? What's the difference? How big is the SLS going to be? Is it going to be a lot bigger than Saturn V rockets?
Yes.
Can you give us, are we orbiting the moon with a command module, or are we landing directly? I mean, what's the vision? And then you have a minute left. Lay out the vision for Mars after
I can
that.
do it.
Can you do it?
Seconds.
All right, good.
All right, here's what we're doing.
Maybe the chairman will give you a couple extra seconds.
SLS rocket, biggest rocket ever built.
Bigger than Saturn V.
Yes, well, it's more powerful than the Saturn V. As far as like the feet high, I'm not sure. I'll tell you, it's taller than the Statue of Liberty. It's big enough. And then the Orion crew capsule at the top of that. Now, we would like to see that go around the moon uncrewed in 2021. When we go around the moon uncrewed, we will be able to do...
That's 2 years from now.
Yes, that's right. Uncrewed, and when it goes around the moon, we're talking about being able to navigate around the moon, to be able to change orbits, to test all of the systems we need to test with the Orion crew capsule and the European service module. So that includes an international partnership right there. But then for Artemis 2, when we have crew on board, the vicinity of the moon still matters here. We're not going to be going to the surface of the moon, but with Artemis 2, we're going to launch into Earth orbit with all of the metabolic systems for human life support, and we're going to test all of those systems in Earth orbit for a period of time. Why? Because we don't want to test them at the moon. Too dangerous with humans. So we're going to test them in Earth orbit, and then we're going to take that Orion crew capsule, and we're going to launch it on a free return trajectory around the moon. So that'll be the first time that we send humans to the vicinity of the moon, and we're looking at 2022, 2023 for that mission. And then, of course, Artemis 3, during all of these missions, we will be aggregating in orbit around the moon what you identified a command module. We want a reusable command module, one that's there for 15 years. So Artemis 3, we launch not just to the vicinity of the moon, we launch to a space station in orbit around the moon. We call it Gateway. It's a reusable command module, think of it that way, where we will have aggregated at the Gateway a human landing system. So our astronauts can go into the Gateway, get into the landing system, go down to the surface of the moon, and then back to the Gateway, and then back into the Orion crew capsule and come back to Earth. So that's the whole architecture for the 2024 lunar landing. It's eminently achievable. A lot of things have to go right. Of course, we have to get the budgets to achieve it. But if all of that comes together, which I think it will, we will be having the first woman on the south pole of the moon in 2024.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's very exciting and a great vision.
It is exciting. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Administrator Bridenstine. So good to see you. It's
Always.
good to see you in this position. I've known your passion for NASA, and that's really what you wanted to do. And to see your leadership and your vision, we love it. Couple of questions I have dealing with China and great power competition. As you talk about commercialization and Artemis and Gateway, let me ask you, what are your contingency plans if what you need is not commercially available, or it's not mission ready, or it's, let's say it's already earmarked for defense priorities? So what is your contingency plan so that you stay on schedule?
Yes,
and
ma'am.
meet your timeline? So
So when we look at the architecture, we want to build dissimilar redundancy into as much of the architecture as possible. In fact, we talked about landers. A little bit earlier, we talked about having multiple human landers that are reusable, that can go back and forth to the moon from the Gateway. And ultimately, why do we want multiple human landers in the development process? Because if one of them falls behind or can't meet the milestones, the other ones can go forward. And that is how we build reusable, or I should say, dissimilar redundancy into the architecture so that we can keep moving forward even if one falls behind. What we don't want to do is end up in a position where we put all of our eggs into one basket,
Right.
and then we can't achieve the milestone. That's, quite frankly, what we've done with SLS and Orion. Now, those are the only two systems that exist that are going to be able to get us to the moon. And so we're on the 5-yard line. We're going to finish those programs. They're going to take us to the moon, and they're going to be the flagship of our moon missions thereafter. That being said, we want to make sure that in the future we have multiple dissimilar capabilities that don't get us bogged down on the way.
Awesome. That sounds great. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to yield back my time because I see Senator Markey's come in, and I know we have a vote that is on the floor and we need to finish. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Massachusetts has played a proud role in the United States space program, from the leadership of President Kennedy to the hundreds of scientists who worked in labs at MIT and other institutions up in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts factories that manufactured gear for the missions. The ingenuity and know-how of Massachusetts was key in changing the impossible to the possible with our scientists and engineers and physicists and designers and manufacturers. And as the space race has turned from a sprint into a series of marathons, it becomes more and more important to make smart and balanced decisions for the long-term health of our space program. Minister Bridenstine, you have estimated that it will cost around an additional $20 to $30 billion to bring American astronauts back to the surface of the moon. In the Trump administration's fiscal year 2020 budget amendment, NASA asked for the ability to move funds from other parts of the agency to its moon landing program. So, Mr. Administrator, can you commit that NASA will not decimate valuable programs such as those in the Science Directorate, which study everything from solar wind to the possibility of life on Mars, in order to fund its mission to the moon?
Yeah, so just so you're aware, Senator, I've worked very hard to make sure that the additional money needed for Artemis, for going back to the moon, did not cannibalize any other parts of NASA's budget. And I worked hard to achieve that, and in fact, we achieved that. Now, where that money came from, that was well above my pay grade, but I can commit to you that I continue to work to make sure that we don't cannibalize one part of NASA to feed another part of NASA, and I'll tell you why: because it doesn't work. Now, we've tried this before in the 1990s, where we were going to fund the Space Exploration Initiative by taking money out of the International Space Station, and that created all kinds of problems. Then in the 2000s. We were going to take it out of the Science Mission Directorate. That created partisan problems. And so at the end, it never works. So what we're trying to do is make sure that people understand that this achievement will be accomplished so long as there's strong bipartisan support, and that's what we're looking for.
Thank you. And that would be my goal as well, working with the chairman and the other members of the committee, because it's clear that we can't, once again, lift our gaze to the moon while engaging in tunnel vision here.
Yes, sir.
On Earth. We have to ensure that the other science is also fully funded. NASA was appropriated $218 million for lunar science in fiscal year 2019. Mr. Administrator, has NASA been working with the national academies or broader academic community in determining the science projects that will be flown on the commercial lunar payload services?
I'll have to take that for the record. I can tell you that as an agency, it has been my direction to all of the mission directorates to follow the guidance of the National Academy of Sciences. If there is any concern that we are not doing that, I would love to know it. But as far as I'm concerned, we ought to be following the guidance of the National Academy of Sciences.
Yeah, it's absolutely imperative that we stay close to the national academies and the whole scientific community. It will enhance the likelihood that we will be successful. And finally, it's been more than 50 years since this country has built some of the technology we need on the moon, including lunar spacesuits. Notably, David Clark Company, based in Worcester, built the spacesuits for the Gemini program and the radio headsets for the Apollo missions. We have no spacesuits for deep space missions today, and it can take years to get spacesuit technology ready to use, raising questions about how we meet the 2024 target. Mr. Administrator, what is NASA's planned schedule for development and procurement of spacesuits for the 2024 moon landing?
It's a wonderful question. We just had this conversation this morning. It's a challenge. Spacesuits are very complex, and they're not easy to come by. And a spacesuit for the International Space Station is very different than a spacesuit for the moon. You've got lunar dust. You've got different thermal challenges on the moon that you don't have in low Earth orbit. So we do need the development of a new spacesuit. What we're looking at is a spacesuit architecture that is flexible, one that can be used both in low Earth orbit and at the moon. And as early as 2020, we will be testing parts of a spacesuit on the International Space Station. And then the goal is ultimately to test the suits on the International Space Station. Right now, the plan is 2023 for those suits. If we were to get Artemis funded, we could accelerate those to build margin into the schedule.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, I would request from you, Mr. Administrator, a timeline from NASA on what your plan is to develop these spacesuits?
Yes, sir.
Because without some kind of a plan that is in place, and you said you had a conversation before this hearing with your staff, I think it would be important for us to be able to see what that is, because a vision without that kind of a technology is an hallucination. Okay, we just won't be able to ultimately be able to put it in place. So
yes, sir.
Thank you for your service. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Senator Markey, I would commend to your attention the recent article on the first moon landing, which was published in the Smithsonian magazine, wherein it was revealed that the designer and inventor of the space suit was holding his breath when the two astronauts were jumping up and down on the moon, for fear that Buzz Aldrin would, in his exuberance, fall over and hit a jagged rock. Things turned out okay, but that was a moment of anxiety. Thank you. Other members were going to try to come, but I think we'll filibuster no longer. Mr. Bridenstine, we thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For your testimony. We wish you well. I think you can see there's great enthusiasm for this topic. We look forward to hearing from you again. The hearing record will remain open for 2 weeks. During this time, senators are asked to submit any questions for the record. Upon receipt, the witnesses are requested to submit their written answers to the committee as soon as possible. So we conclude the hearing. We thank you, sir, and we now adjourn the hearing.
Thank you, Chairman.